Amid the frenzied morning rush in Chicago's bustling downtown, a pregnant woman stumbled and fell onto the icy sidewalk, her breath catching in the cold air. Scores of passers-by paused, their eyes locked on the scene, yet none stepped forward. The crowd stood still, as if rooted to the ground, until one figure broke the silence. A man in a weathered leather jacket, his arms adorned with intricate tattoos, his presence one that sparked unease in strangers' glances. Whispers of judgment trailed him, accusations, sneers, sharp words, but he paid them no mind. He knelt beside her, lifted her gently, and carried her towards safety through a storm of stares as piercing as shards of glass. What unfolded next will challenge your assumptions. Before we unravel this tale, drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. A heavy fog clung to Chicago's skyline, casting a muted glow over the city. Streetlights hummed to life as dawn struggled to break through. Michigan Avenue pulsed with its usual chaos, car horns blaring, bus brakes screeching, and commuters elbowing past one another in a hurry. The air carried the sharp bite of snow and the tang of diesel fumes, wrapping the streets in a gritty haze. Ethan Carter steadied his motorcycle, one boot braced against the slick pavement, idling at a traffic light. The chrome on his bike gleamed faintly, catching the city's fragmented lights like scattered embers. His leather jacket, faded at the seams, hugged his broad frame. Tattoos snaked from beneath his cuffs, tracing over hands that gripped the handlebars with quiet confidence. Beneath his scuffed helmet, Ethan's grey eyes surveyed the scene, his face carved by years of wind and unspoken burdens, betraying little emotion. Yet beneath that stoic mask, his senses were sharp, attuned to every sound and shift around him. Ethan's mind hummed with quiet vigilance, catching every abrupt gesture, every raised voice, every ripple in the crowd's rhythm. He knew this city's highs and lows, and today it felt charged with an unspoken tension. The bus beside him lurched forward with a heavy groan, inching through the intersection. Pedestrians jostled at the crosswalk, their umbrellas clashing. Somewhere nearby, a cab driver leaned on his horn, the sound cutting through the din. Ethan exhaled, his breath clouding briefly inside his helmet. He glanced at the traffic light, still red, his fingers tapping a steady beat against the throttle. Amid the clamor of engines and footsteps, something tugged at his instincts, a faint disturbance, subtle but sharp. It was less sight than feeling. He leaned forward, his weight shifting, just as a piercing screech of brakes shattered the air. The bus ahead jerked to a halt, its passengers thrown forward in a chaotic tumble. Shouts erupted. "Listen," he said, meeting her frightened eyes. "I'm getting you to a hospital. You don't have to trust me. Just let me help." Her lips parted as if to protest, but a wave of pain silenced her, her body tensing. A soft whimper escaped her. That settled it. Ethan adjusted his hold and moved toward the bike. A woman's voice rang out behind him, sharp and accusing. "Stop him!" He ignored it, reaching the motorcycle in a few strides. He eased her onto the seat, steadying the bike with one hand. She slumped forward, clutching the handlebars for balance. 10 minutes, Ethan said, his voice rough but earnest. "That's all I system need you to hold on for." She gave a faint nod, her strength fading. Ethan swung onto the bike, positioning her carefully within the shield of his arms. He revved the engine, its roar slicing through the thick Chicago air. For a moment he glimpsed the crowd's faces, distrustful, some already tapping their phones. Muttering about the biker abducting a woman, he buried his anger deep. This wasn't about them. It was about her. The light turned green. Ethan gunned the throttle, the bike surging into traffic, its growl a defiant pulse against the city's chaos. The streets blurred into streaks of wet asphalt and neon signs. Ethan leaned forward, his body a barrier against the wind and snow, absorbing every jolt of the road. The woman let out a soft cry, one hand gripping his jacket, the other pressed to her belly. "You're doing great," Ethan said through clenched teeth, swerving past a honking sedan as he sped through an intersection. The hospital was 5 blocks away, each one a battle against red lights and careless pedestrians. The snow fell heavier, stinging his face like tiny blades, but Ethan didn't ease up. The hospital's blue emergency sign glowed ahead, a beacon in the storm. Almost there. He urged the bike forward, his jaw tight. "Hang on," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "We're going to make it." The motorcycle skidded into the emergency bay, tires splashing through slush as Ethan hit the brakes. The jolt sent the woman forward, but he was ready, steadying her with firm hands. Snowflakes clung to his jacket as he helped her down, her weight heavy against him. She clutched her belly, breathless, her face etched with pain. Inside the glass doors, 2 security guards froze, their eyes narrowing at the sight of the soaked, a tattooed man cradling a pregnant woman. One reached for his radio, hesitating. Ethan didn't wait. He pushed through the doors, his boots squeaking on the tile, his voice cutting through the ER's hum. "She needs a doctor, now!" Heads turned. Nurses paused at their stations. A receptionist flinched, startled. The room's scrutiny hit him like a wave, quick judgments, silent assumptions. A man like him, bringing in a woman like her, spelled trouble in their eyes. A nurse with silver hair and a no-nonsense air was the first to move. Wheeling a chair forward, "Set her here," she said, her tone brisk but warm. Ethan complied, lowering the woman gently. She clung to his sleeve for a moment before letting go, a soft whimper escaping her. Another nurse rushed in with a monitor, while a doctor shouted for a stretcher. Ethan stepped back, hands raised slightly, signaling he meant no threat. He caught the doctor's sharp glance, followed by a whispered order to a nurse, who hurried toward the security desk. Ethan's gut twisted. He knew that look, suspicion ready to escalate. A guard approached, his posture stiff. "Sir, step back," he said, his voice polite but laced with warning. Ethan wiped snow from his face and nodded. "All right," he said, his throat raw from the cold. He retreated toward the entrance, every stair in the room prickling his skin. As the medical team wheeled the woman toward a treatment bay, she turned slightly, her eyes finding his for a fleeting second. Her lips parted as if to speak, but the doors swung shut and she was gone. Ethan stood amidst the ER's chaos, beeping monitors, hurried footsteps, ringing phones, like a statue battered by the storm. The guard lingered nearby, radio crackling, waiting for an excuse to act. Ethan crouched to retrieve his helmet, brushing wet hair from his eyes. Part of him wanted to demand an update, to know if she was okay. But the weight of every glance held him back. He didn't fit here, they'd made that clear. Without a word, he turned and stepped into the snow. The doors slid shut behind him, leaving only the storm's howl. Outside, the snow fell in thick sheets, blanketing the asphalt. His motorcycle stood alone under a dim streetlight, its frame slick with ice. Ethan leaned against the hospital's brick wall, his jacket heavy with water. He tilted his head back, letting the snow cool his face. None of it mattered now. He replayed the morning, the screech of brakes, her fall, the fear in her eyes when she saw him. His jaw tightened. No matter what he did, he'd always be the monster first. The parking lot hummed with activity, ambulances gliding in, staff darting through the snow. No one noticed him now, but their earlier judgments lingered like frost. He was used to it, years of sidelong glances, of being defined by his ink and leather. It didn't matter that he'd pulled her from danger. To them, he was the threat. Part of him wanted to march back inside, demand they see him for who he was. But something heavier than pride stopped him, a weariness deeper than anger. Ethan pushed off the wall, his boots crunching in the snow. He reached for his helmet when a soft voice broke through. "Excuse me." He turned. A young nurse stood under the awning, a clipboard pressed to her chest. Her scrubs hung loosely and snow dusted her hair. She looked cautious but not afraid. "The woman you brought in," she said, stepping closer. Her shoes crunching softly. "She's stable. The baby's fine too." Ethan's chest tightened, relief flooding through him. He nodded, his voice caught in his throat. The nurse paused, then added, "She asked about you, wanted to thank you." Ethan swallowed, brushing snow from his face. "Tell her." He cleared his throat, steadying himself. "Tell her she's tougher than she knows." The nurse gave a small, warm smile before hurrying back inside, the doors hissing shut. Ethan stood for a moment, her words settling around him. Then he pulled on his helmet, straddled the bike and kicked the engine to life. The roar cut through the storm, steady and familiar. As he pulled away, the hospital faded into the snowy haze. The city stretched ahead, cold and unyielding. But a small weight lifted from Ethan's shoulders. He didn't need their approval. He knew who he was. Tonight that was enough. In the hospital room, fluorescent lights flickered softly above as Sarah lay in the bed, a thin blanket draped over her rounded belly. Monitors hummed at her side, their steady rhythm blending with the sharp scent of antiseptic. She shifted, grimacing at the ache in her hips. Her body felt heavy, drained, but her mind raced, replaying the morning's chaos with vivid clarity. The bus's sudden stop, the terror of falling, the moment she thought she'd lose everything. Sarah closed her eyes, sinking into the pillow. She could still feel the rough texture of his jacket, still see the steady grey of his eyes, unwavering amid the panic. There'd been no hesitation in him, only a fierce need to help. Guilt churned in her chest. She remembered how she'd flinched at his outstretched hand, how she'd judged his tattoos, his rugged look, how quickly she'd assumed the worst. The door creaked open, and a nurse entered carrying a chart. She offered a kind smile. "How are you holding up, Miss Harper?" Sarah propped herself up, mindful of the IV in her hand. "Exhausted," she said, her voice hoarse, "but better." "The baby?" "Strong and steady," the nurse replied, nodding. "You're both in good shape." Sarah exhaled, relief washing over her. The nurse scribbled a note, then paused. "The man who brought you in," she said, glancing up. "Big guy, tattoos. You remember him?" Sarah nodded, her throat tightening. "He stayed a while," the nurse said, her smile softening. "Asked me to tell you you're tougher than you know." Sarah's breath caught, tears stinging her eyes. "Did he leave a name?" she asked, though she sensed the answer. The nurse shook her head. "Just the message." The door closed, leaving Sarah in the room's quiet hum. She stared at the wall, the weight of her actions pressing down. She'd always prided herself on fairness, on teaching her students to look beyond appearances. Yet when it mattered most, she'd let fear cloud her judgment. She'd seen Ethan not as the man who saved her, but as a stereotype born of her own biases. Tears spilled down her cheeks, not from pain but from regret, from realizing she'd been part of the problem she'd vowed to fight. Sarah wiped her face with the blanket's edge and took a shaky breath. This moment wouldn't fade quietly. She'd learned from it, and she'd teach others to do the same. It began here, with seeing people for their actions, not their looks. The sun dipped low over Chicago's skyline as Sarah stepped from a cab, her bag slung over her shoulder. The crisp fall air carried the scent of wet pavement and leaves. She paused outside Lincoln Elementary's gates, her heart steady but resolute. 3 days had passed since the incident, 3 days of reflection, restless nights, and a burning need to set things right, not just for herself, but for the young minds she guided daily. She took a deep breath and crossed the threshold, the gate's familiar clank grounding her. The school's halls buzzed with morning energy, kids laughing, teachers herding groups, the smell of chalk and paper in the air. Sarah nodded at a colleague, but her focus was unwavering. Today's lesson wouldn't come from a book. Her classroom door swung open, and the chatter of second graders filled the air. Bright faces turned to her, some still nibbling snacks, others sketching in notebooks. Sarah set her bag down, shed her coat, and moved to the front with deliberate steps. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice warm but firm. "Good morning, Ms. Harper," the class replied in a cheerful jumble. She skipped the usual routine. No spelling quizzes, no math problems. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn motorcycle helmet, its surface scratched from use. Whispers of curiosity spread. Sarah held it up, letting the light catch a small emblem, a star encircled by flames. "Today," she said, her voice quieting the room, "I'm going to share a story." The children leaned in, pencils forgotten. Sarah spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. She told them about the day she fell, the fear that gripped her, and the man who caught her before she hit the ground. She described the race to the hospital, the biting snow, and how the world had rushed to judge him based on his appearance. She paused, scanning their attentive faces, wide eyes, thoughtful frowns. "At first," she said, clutching the helmet, "I was scared of him. Not because he did anything wrong, but because I let his looks tell me a false story." A boy raised his hand. "Miss Harper, was he a bad person?" Sarah's smile was soft, tinged with regret. No, Liam, he was one of the bravest, kindest people I've ever met. He didn't care that I was afraid. He just cared that I was safe. The room fell silent, the kind of hush teachers cherish. Sarah set the helmet on her desk. "Here's what I want you to remember," she said, her voice gentle but resolute. "It's easy to judge someone by their outside, their clothes, their tattoos, their voice. But real courage, real kindness doesn't always look friendly. Sometimes the person who seems the scariest is the one who'll stand by you when no one else will." The children sat still, her words sinking in. Sarah felt a knot in her chest ease. She hadn't just learned a lesson, she'd been given a chance to share it. She glanced at the helmet, then at her students, a spark of hope igniting. "Don't let fear decide who someone is," she said. "Let their actions show you the truth." For the first time in days, Sarah felt a quiet strength, something deeper than regret, more enduring than shame. She felt peace. Join us to share stories that matter. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to start your day with lessons that inspire and connect.